You're listening to Me and Paranormal You with your host, Ryan Singer. It's more fun to believe. Third year bonus.
And here we go. We're off to the races. How you doing? Good afternoon, good morning, good evening. I hope you're having a good, whatever time of day and or night it is. I mean, what is time, right? I mean, what is... I was having a fun conversation with a friend yesterday about time, and it's just... I could think about time all the time. I really could. This is Ryan Singer. I'm hosting Me and Paranormal You. Hosting Me and Paranormal. Yeah, I guess I'm talking about myself passively, but actively. I don't understand grammatical terms all the way, all the time. Anyway, thank you for joining me. This is a third-year bonus. This is a solo episode. We're going to talk a little bit about the elusive science, origins of experimental psychical research here today, amongst other things that are happening. You know, what is the emotional connection between, human beings, or what is the emotional bridge between science and the paranormal? And the science and the paranormal are the same thing, right? What's the emotional connection between human beings and science, or human beings and the study of and or the awareness of paranormal abilities, psi abilities, psychical research, etc. Well, in this great book, The Elusive Science, Maskoff and McVaugh, Seymour Maskoff and Michael McVaugh, there's actually an afterword by J.B. Rhine, Jackson Banks Rhine, and L.E. Rhine, his wife. But, they lay it out pretty clearly here. For telepathy to be successful, the information to be transmitted had to have deep personal and emotional significance. Hence, Soul's failure could be explained in any number of ways, all of which came back to this. His careful experimental method was not suited to the phenomena he hoped to observe. Now, this is in reference to specifically experimentation done that was kind of dull. Or, what we might say is boring, no personal or no emotional attachment to, or, no emotional aspect or component inside the research itself. Now, we can go through history and, we can talk about when did this start, right? And organized psychical research can be dated symbolically from a conversation between Harry Sidgwick and his student F.W.H. Myers one moonlit night in Cambridge about 1870 over the need to validate religious belief through the methods of empirical science. It's also from the book in a different section. We are coming up on 155 years by that estimation, by that number. Then you get into, something interesting. I have a deck here. Some Zener cards, which were J.B. Rhine developed those, I believe. If I'm just kind of talking off the cuff here, but J.B. Rhine created those to study and to train and actually to practice, ESP and to tap into one's psychic ability. Now, there's a couple of other things that maybe we could get into from here. Rhine stressed further common elements in their background, artistic interests, sociability, and family history of mildly clairvoyant practices. He had some graduate students, right? And that he was, that he's referencing there. And why am I bringing that up? These seemingly, somewhat loosely connected, maybe more connected. Ryan, are they? Well, yes. And a lot of this ties into a great conversation that I was having yesterday about the idea of, emotionality, artistic expression, and the paranormal or the psi. And you don't have to be an artist to be psychic. You don't have to be a writer to have telepathic powers I mean, I believe, and I think most people listening to this program probably are in the same boat. These are inherent characteristics and or attributes, abilities of everyone. Some people, for some reason, seem to be more tapped in than others, and oftentimes that comes with problems in their life. Or that is to say, causes problems for them in their life. Whether it is the very dangerous poison of feeling isolated. I think isolation is probably one of the most poisonous feelings that we can have as people. We have seen isolation play out in many dangerous ways for one's own self and for people around them. Sometimes you hear about the lone wolf shooter or things like that. When someone feels disconnected, when someone feels alone and misunderstood, that can lead to dark things. And anyone who has experienced profound paranormal phenomena or had an SPE, spontaneous paranormal experience, when they weren't even looking for it, that can lead them to an unexpected period of isolation. And I suppose oftentimes isolation, at least in its dangerous form, could be, characterized often, if not all the time, I wouldn't say all the time, every single case, as unexpected. There are times where we go into isolation on purpose. We tap into the introverted nature of ourselves, whether we need to recharge, focus on a project, connect with something that we feel disconnected from. Those are therapeutic times. So isolation itself is not a necessarily bad thing. But an unexpected isolation because of something that is unexplainable or something that for some reason gives us some kind of shame for feeling like we may be judged or ridiculed for expressing or detailing the event, that can be dangerous and that can be very unhealthy for us. As someone who has had multiple paranormal experiences, I can relate to that. I think if you're listening to this, you probably can also relate to that, maybe even more so than me. And at the very least, even if you've never had a paranormal experience that has made you feel isolated from those around you, if you're listening to this program, I'm guessing you have empathy. And I think I would bet my entire net worth on it, which is, I don't know, about negative $75,000. So I will bet you negative $75,000. And if that, could you imagine? And if I lose the bet, I win the money. I don't want to lose that bet. Anyway, we're not making bets, and I'm also making up numbers. So, any hoodles. There is an emotional component to all of this. And when it comes to the people who don't have control over their paranormal abilities, their psi abilities, PSI, psi abilities, it can become, and not even become, it is deeply emotional for these people. There are those amongst us who have seemingly tapped into or been born into a deeper understanding or grasp of these abilities. And when I say understanding, I don't mean all the time that they know how it happens and why it happens and when it happens and how to make it happen. What I just mean is that it is closer to their fingertips than for the rest of us to be used. And oftentimes they don't even know they're using it or aren't planning on using it or don't even want to use it. And yet there it is. Think of Edward Scissorhands. Edward Scissorhands, not Scissors Hands. That was his cousin. Edward Scissorhands. You know, his hands are scissors, but scissors are his hands. So it makes it difficult to do things when you're worried about slicing everything up. It makes it more difficult to hold a bunny rabbit when you want to hold a bunny rabbit. You don't want to worry about killing the bunny rabbit or slicing it up, but you can't help it because you have scissors for hands. So when people have deeply profound abilities of manifestation and psychic and etc., you can understand that they don't always want to be having those scissor hands, because sometimes they just want to hold a bunny rabbit and not have to think about it. We are going to take a quick break, and just a reminder, patreon.com/Ryan Singer. $3 a month gets you no commercials ever. $1 a month gets you no commercials, sometimes, maybe a couple times a month, and even being a free patron. Signing up to be a free member, no obligations, still gets you maybe one or two episodes a month without advertisements. So go on over there and join the community and check it out. Thank you so much to everybody who's already signed up. Love having you over there. And we're going to be right back after this short break. And we are back. We are talking about emotionality. We're talking about the emotional connection to paranormal phenomena. We're also talking about, I guess, how we color outside the lines a little bit here when it comes to trying to understand our connection to the paranormal, the supernatural, even the mystical. And why is it a key component to, why is, this spirituality or artistry or emotional, this emotional foundation, why is it so... why is the connection so important when it comes to certain things like this? And I do think it ties into, we can go back and we can look at throughout the history of different types of shamanic practice. And if you go into the book Shamanism by Mircea Eliade, Archaic Techniques of Ecstasy, which is apparently one of the seminal works studying of shamanism, you can go to, there's a section called, let's see here, Shamanism among the Chukchi. Family shamanism is also found among the Chukchi, in the sense that during the ceremonies celebrated by the head of the family, everyone, even the children, takes a try at the drum. This is the case, for example, on the occasion of the autumn slaughter, when animals are immolated to ensure a supply of game throughout the year. The drum is beaten, for each family has its own drum, and attempts are made to incarnate the spirits and to shamanize. But in Bogaras's own opinion, this is obviously only a poor imitation of the shamanic seance. The ceremony is held in the outer tent and by day, whereas shamanic seances take place in the sleeping room at night and in complete darkness. One after the other, the members of the family imitate possession by the spirits in shamanic fashion, writhing, leaping into the air, and trying to emit inarticulate sounds, which are supposed to be the voice and language of the spirits. Sometimes even, shamanic cures are attempted and prophecies are uttered, to which no one pays any attention. All these features prove that, with the help of temporary religious exaltation, laymen try to attain the shamanic state by aping all the shaman's gestures. The model is certainly the trance of the real shaman, but the imitation is largely confined to its external aspects. The spirit voices and the secret language, the pseudo-prophesizing, and so on. Family shamanism, at least in its present form, is only plagiaristic aping of the ecstatic technique of the professional shaman. Then, too, shamanic seances proper take place in the evening at the end of the religious ceremonies just described. They are executed by professional shamans. Family shamanism has every appearance of being a hybrid phenomena, presumably arising from two causes. One, a great many Chukchi claim to be shamans, and since each house has its own drum, there are many who, on winter evenings, set themselves to drumming and singing, and sometimes even attain a para-shamanic ecstasy. 2. The religious tension of the periodic festivals encourages any latent exaltation and produces a certain contagion. But we repeat, in both cases there is attempted imitation of a pre-existing model, the professional shaman's ecstatic technique. Among the Chukchi, as throughout Asia, the shamanic vocation is usually manifested by a spiritual crisis brought on either by an initiatory illness or by a supernatural apparition, like a wolf, a walrus, etc., appearing at a moment of great danger and saving the future shaman. In any case, the crisis brought on by the quote-unquote sign, illness, apparition, etc., is basically resolved in the shamanic experience itself. The Chukchi assimilate the period of preparation to a serious illness and inspiration, that is, accomplished initiation, to cure. Most of the shamans Bogaris encountered claim to have no masters, but this does not mean that they did not have superhuman teachers. The meeting with shamanic animals itself indicates the kind of teaching that an apprentice may receive. A shaman told Bogaras that, while still a youth, he heard a voice of command, "Go into the wilderness. There you will find a tiny drum. Try it and prove its qualities." He obeyed the voice and found himself able to see the whole world, to mount to the sky, and even to set up his tent in the clouds. For whatever the general tendency of Chukchi shamanism in its present phase, that is, as observed by ethnographers, and at the beginning of this century, the Chukchi shaman is no less able than others to fly through the air and traverse the heavens one after the other, passing through the orifice of the pole star. It goes on to say the Chukchi are aware of the decadence in their shamans. For example, they often have recourse to tobacco as a stimulant, a practice borrowed from the Tungus. And whereas Chukchi folklore dwells on the trances and ecstatic journeys of the old shamans in search of patient souls, today the Chukchi shaman is satisfied with a pseudo-trance. We receive the impression that ecstatic technique is in decadence, shamanic seances being generally reduced to evocation of the spirits and fakiristic feats. But there is a lot of symbology and symbolism in the words and in the language, at least as they are translated into English for us to dive into here. The idea that the shamanic journey or that the initiation and or the practice of such, that it is, we read about the something happened, some crisis has happened, right? Whether it's an illness or saved by an animal of some kind, right? Your life being saved. There is a flashpoint, I guess, is a phrase that I've started saying in the last 2 weeks. I'm not exactly sure why, but there's a flashpoint. And we can talk about the connection between autoimmune disorders and psychic abilities all day, and we have on this program for quite a while. We can also talk about near-death experiences and the initiation to being a medium and or powerful psychic abilities that come with such an event in someone's life. What is it about these events? What is it about the sudden illness or the sickness? What is it about almost dying and or dying and then coming back to life? What is it about these things? I mean, we can see a correlation between those things. We don't have to go very far to understand that correlation. Sickness leads to death, right? Typically, or it leads to the loss of things. Whether you get sick and it makes you go blind, or whether you go sick and it leads to the loss of maybe being able to use your legs or your hearing, your sense of hearing, but it doesn't kill you. There's still something that is being, I suppose, subtracted in some way, and then accentuating something else, potentially, right? Now, what's interesting is we don't quite understand exactly what it is about these things. that correlates to the paranormal abilities. And it looks like a commercial is coming up. I'm going to skip this one again. So we're just gonna add a couple extra. The commercial breaks are gonna be slightly longer, but less of them because I don't feel like breaking again right now. So okay, let's keep going. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna try to understand at the very least that there is a correlation between these two things, even if we don't understand what that correlation is. I mean, I think it's obvious to many of us who spend what some would say way too much time involved in trying to wrap our brains, to be said, wrap our minds around such things. And that's not to say that that there are not psychics out there who don't have some kind of illness or near-death experience, because most certainly there are. And it's that thing where, like, it's that old saying, not all, what is it? It's like one of those old trick questions, like not all women are doctors, but not all doctors are women, or something, or whatever. You know what I'm saying? Not all psychics are sick, and not all sick people are psychics. Now, because there are psychics out there who don't suffer from any of the myriad of autoimmune disorders that can really take a toll on a person's life. Now, or have a near-death experience, or multiple near-death experiences, for that matter, which you do hear about. And my friend Carolyn in Florida has had. Now, correlation does not equal causation is a scientific phrase that you often hear, or at least I often hear, or I feel like I have often heard. But when it comes to shamanic work, tapping into the other side, and for the sake of being way too rudimentary, and in an attempt not to be dismissive of indigenous culture, let us, for the sake of this conversation, assume that there is a correlation, there is an overlap between shamanic journeying, shamanic work, and the work that holistic practitioners who are psychic, intuitive, mediums, Reiki, etc., that there is an overlap there. And I think that's something we can probably all get on board with to a certain degree. We're talking about traversing into a separate realm. And there is shamanic work that is physical, and the spiritual illness and or the physical illness. So there needs to be a distinction there as well. And there are practitioners of the holistic variety, specifically Reiki and or others who have been trained in multiple modalities, who also traverse between spiritual and physical. And that's not to say that doesn't happen in modern times as well, outside of the indigenous traditional shamanic cultures. But I think we can agree that when it comes to the journeying or the connecting to spirit or accessing a higher source of information that is channeled through a person, they are not the source. And every psychic or medium or intuitive practitioner will tell you that they are not the source of this energy and or information. They are simply channeling it and or bringing it to the person who is seeking it from them. There is a correlation there. And when it comes to the initiatory experience of the shaman having an illness and or, at least specifically when Elliot is talking about the Chukchi, which is, I believe, in the Kamchatka region, right? So we're talking north, because of my years and years of playing Risk all the time. It is, think top northeast section of Russia, where that land bridge, close to where that land bridge would have existed, thousands and thousands of years ago, connecting to Alaska. That's the area we're talking about. Very cold, very harsh living conditions, at least by my standards anyway. And we're talking negative 50 degrees at times, but life goes on, and people do survive and thrive, in fact. Now, I'm a lizard, though. I can't be living that kind of life. So we have this connection between crisis and abilities. And in cultures that support and have this as part of the understanding about how the world is, what modern science often and so incorrectly and quite frankly, we always choose to be offended, right? Being offended is a choice. Indeed, I do believe that, but it's but it is offensive to be labeling cultures as primitive nowadays. Now, I understand that there is a scientific understanding of that word as far as time frames go, as opposed to being a pejorative judgment on the intellect of a society, right? That it actually speaks to a specific time period in sciences, in the study, in anthropological studies, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, in the Western world specifically, is where this language derives from. Now, when we look at cultures that have, shamanistic structure, or the shaman is, or multiple shamans, or people are emulating shamans, and seances and things like that are part of the fabric of the culture, I would argue that it is less likely for the individuals of these cultures to feel the isolation that we're talking about here today, that can lead to, dangerous situations for the individual. And the poisonous nature, the poisonous side of isolation, it's a damn shame, in fact, that in Western culture, and there is change happening. You see a shift in the willingness to be open by many people to spirituality. And now, I believe that with that comes some unintended consequences, and that is the distrust of science across the board. We're talking about immunization, things like that, because there are many, many beneficial aspects of modern science. And I believe disease control and combating disease is one of those hugely beneficial components of modern science and the advances that we have made. There's a reason there's 11 billion people on the planet. Okay? And one of those reasons is because of the advancements made in science and immunology. Am I saying that correctly? Immunology? I don't know if I've said that word maybe 17 times in my entire life, but when it comes to vaccines and treatment of causes that previously would have killed us, no doubt about it, right? Now we can survive these things through advanced medical techniques and treatment and vaccinations for communicable diseases and, and things like that. So there's been many great advancements. But when people are reawakening or going back to a more spiritualistic approach to life, a more idealistic approach, leaning away from the materialistic and the materialism viewpoint of modern science in the Western world, I think in this moment I'm having this realization, with that comes more of a distrust of modern science, because we understand that we have been disconnected from a large part of ourselves and a large part of our potential and the nature the truth of the universe and the world surrounding us, in the mystical and the magical and the supernatural, that has been shunned, and not only shunned, it has been ridiculed. So why would something ridicule it? Because it doesn't want us to know it, because it will empower us. So the thing that's ridiculing it must be wholly bad and nefarious, when in fact it's not. It's just an aspect of it. Everything wants to survive, I suppose, to some degree, and will do the things it feels are necessary to survive. Or at least there's a component of that. There's a small component of that in anything that is alive, right? And that goes to the same thing with an ideological viewpoint or a way of living or something like that as well. So that doesn't mean that whole thing is bad. And in fact, for the last month and a half or so, we've been talking about how, in fact, human nature is actually pretty good, and we've been led to believe erroneously that it's not. So that's where we stand here. We live, okay, we're going to take another short break here. And when we come back, we're going to continue discussing, like, what is the connection between, emotionality, emotions, artistic expression, spirituality, et cetera, and the paranormal. And is it, in fact, more likely that someone who is artistic is going to have paranormal abilities? And I think I already kind of answered that. It is. We can get into that more after this break. And don't forget, patreon.com/Ryan Singer. $3 a month gets you no commercials ever. You could donate up to $1,000 a month if you really wanted. I mean, if that's your bag, I say go for it. Thank you so much to the patrons. I really do appreciate you over there helping me out and sustaining the show. And we'll be right back. And we are back. Thank you for hitting the fast forward button on those commercials. You can just do that. Boom, boom, boom. And then we're back into the show. Anyway, so we're talking about, the connections and all that kind of stuff. You heard me say that just now. But are you more likely to have paranormal abilities or experience paranormal things if you are an artist or you are artistic and identify as such? And I would say that the answer is no. That's not to say that more artists don't have potentially more experiences. And let me explain why I would say that, even though I don't think that they're predestined or determined to have more experiences or be more open to it. I think maybe someone who chooses to live their life outside of the structure, and we know that, we can get into liminality and, George P. Hansen and The Trickster and the Paranormal, in his great work about, anti-structuralism and its connection to the paranormal and the high strange. We do know that outside of the structure, if you are open to living outside of the typical structure, potentially there is more opportunity for that to show up, only because that's where, seemingly, according to Hansen, the paranormal and the strange and the mystical, it thrives in that liminal space outside of the structure. Now, that's not to say that people who aren't living in a very detailed, structured environment haven't had SPEs that have jolted them off their horse or, et cetera, because that definitely 100% happens. Now, a hospital is very structured in the way that it operates. The people typically who are in the hospital who don't work there, they are all in liminal states, and they all are in that crisis mode we were talking about earlier that can be almost an initiatory experience for many people. So where the supernatural and the unknown and the paranormal can really manifest itself or just find you and show you that they are there. So a hospital, I think, is a pretty good example of something that is super detailed and highly structured, where the anti-structural nature of the paranormal thrives and can be actually I don't know, because of the supercharged nature of the liminality that people there are experiencing, transitioning between living and death, health and sickness, etc., or even, and also mentally, mental hospitals as well, going between worlds in their minds potentially. Because of the fascinating study about schizophrenia and multiple personalities, where a person's physical body can, in fact, have different ailments and or characteristics depending on which personality, which aspect of the mind, the non-material mind, even though it's material, I'm sure, at some quantum level, right? Depending on which non-material, for the sake of this conversation right now, is in charge of at the helm of the ship takes on different physical characteristics. Now that to me is extremely fascinating. But it also speaks to the reciprocity between the physical and the non-physical worlds. They affect one another. Our ideas, our thoughts create our world. Our physical world also creates and has an impact on our thoughts. For example, if I get into a car accident and I am badly hurt, I'm going to be feeling that pain physically, and it's going to affect my thoughts. 100%. If it's cold outside, I'm going to be a grumpy bastard. I'm going to be a grumpy bastard over the holidays. That's not true. I'm not going to speak that narrative out in the world. I'm going to be probably the most happy I've ever been in cold weather in my entire life. That's the truth. That's the track I'm laying down for the future, because I'll be back in Ohio for about 3.5 weeks, hanging out with the family, doing some fun stuff, and seeing everybody, celebrating the end of the year holidays. So I'm looking forward to that. Now, I mean, it gets cold here. It gets cold here in Los Angeles, California, where I am currently. It's into the 40s overnight. That's just too cold. I don't enjoy that. But I do like layering. So I'm a hypocrite. I do love getting layered up. Okay, so let's get focused. Let's get back on track here. So, but the artist, the person who lives outside of the structures of normal society, at least I am specifically speaking to my own experience here in the United States, in the quote unquote Western world. Now, living outside of the structure of capitalism and what is expected, you're not successful unless you have a vacation home in this country, which is such a poisonous way to think. Imagine feeling like a failure because you don't own multiple homes. That is fucking crazy, right? Yet that is kind of where we are in this country. You are less than or not successful, etc., according to Uncle Capitalism, because you don't have an excess of the things you need in this life to live, right? Now, I don't want this to be an anti-capitalism rant. I've done more than enough of those on this program. But when you live outside of that structure, the structure that rewards those who comply to the rules and, the ways of thinking, right? You can be rewarded. And that reward, let me be clear about this, in my opinion, is solely financial. I think it is solely financial. Now, that's not to say that someone maybe can't take some pride and find some self-worth in accomplishments, because that most certainly is true. And I'm not trying to diminish that. If you're one of those people listening right now, and there is much self-worth, and and financial things can come from so many different ways, right? I'm just saying specifically capitalism is all about get what you can, how you can, when you can, right? So the artist, or the person who lives outside of that, who dedicates their life to the pursuit of something other than maybe the accumulation of resources, typically financial, but usually mostly material, because let's be honest, the only real reason to accumulate financial, resources is to have the material resources that they can bring you. So I think we're not even talking about money here. We're talking about just material goods and resources, right? And those are very structured. So I guess it just leaves you open for more experience of that. Now, that's not to say that you don't need those things, even if you're living outside of the typical structure, because, I am living outside of that typical structure, yet I rely on it very much as well. And I do desire to, accumulate more resources. I'd be hypocritical if I said I didn't. That's just the truth. I could act like I'm, the Dalai Lama all day long over here, but that's, very, very far from the truth. But when it comes to, being able to tap into all of those things that are seemingly, magical and mystical, when in fact they are natural and normal as opposed to paranormal, those who have suffered greatly through illness and autoimmune disorders and get thrust into this life, or those who have crossed to the other side of physical life and back, and they have glimpsed it. And maybe that's the key. Seeing is believing. Experiencing is knowing. Maybe that's the key. We're going to talk about the key. And we're going to expound upon that a little more when we come back after this. I believe this is probably one of the last breaks. We'll be right back. And we are back. We're talking about the key to experiencing more paranormal or supernatural or psychic abilities. And what could that be? Well, I think there are a million different keys to being able to do that, if I had to guess. One of them would be dying and then coming back to life. Because when you've seen the other side in such a profound way, how could you, it's like you're just woken up, essentially. There's no more... No more Mr. Nice Guy. No more Mr. Wee. You know what I mean? But it's quite actually the opposite of that. It's no more Mr. Mean Guy. You understand that death isn't final. Physical death isn't the final form. And in fact, it's just a temporary stop along the way. And I've never died. I have never had a near-death experience where, I've almost died physically. Certainly, I think like all of us have in the age of the automobile, etc. But when it comes to, physically having to be brought back to life through medical professionals, through the wonders and the beauty of science and the advancements in the medical field, I have never died in that way. I've never been pronounced dead or had to be cleared. Had to have, my heart kick-started again. Thankfully, I'm very lucky in that way. Now, people who they've seen things. They know things. They know things that most of us are probably thankful to not have to know in that way. But what we can learn from these people is they bring back to us an experience of truth, an experience of experience. And so now they see. And it could be one of those things that's just quite as simple as this. Now, this might blow your mind if you've never heard it before, and I think by now most people have. But if you're ever on the road or watching TV and there's a FedEx commercial, if you've never seen the arrow in the word FedEx, you will see it now. There is an arrow in the middle of the word, right? And it's on purpose. And it's like subconscious that you see it until you know it. And then once you know it, you can't stop seeing it every time you see the FedEx logo. You can't help but see the arrow first, practically, every single time. I remember, I don't know, 10 years ago, I think, is when I learned about the FedEx arrow. So I was in my 30s. But once I saw it, I was just like, holy smokes, it's right there in front of me this whole time. It's been there the whole damn time, and I never saw it. And now that I saw it, I can't unsee it. In fact, it's the only thing I do see. I barely see the letters FedEx. I pretty much only see the arrow now. Every single time. It doesn't matter what color it is. It doesn't matter, what size it is, if it's tiny or if it's large on the side of a billboard or a giant, semi-truck or on a piece of paper. It doesn't matter the size. It doesn't matter what the color configuration is. Even when I hear FedEx, I see the arrow. I hear the arrow, I suppose. If I'm hearing the word FedEx, I hear the arrow. So why am I talking about this? Well, once you see the afterlife or the in-between, the after form, how are you ever supposed to not see it, I suppose? Maybe it's just quite as simple as that. And, you're just never going to not see it again. It's like, oh, duh. Oh, wow. It's been there the whole time. Wow. How did I not see it? Okay. Life is different now. I see this. I've seen death. And as a great conversation we just had with this last week with Lauren Osborne, she speaks to this when she said, and I'm paraphrasing, I don't have the exact sentence and I should, but the idea that once, being on the brink of, or having a near-death experience, you realize that death is around us the whole time, all along. All around us, all along. Death is here. And so to me, that's the same thing here. And you talk to enough people and you intellectually believe something, and, and the difference between intellectually believing something and experiencing it and knowing it at the mitochondria level of your atoms, is different, sure. But we can know things, right, without experiencing them, and we can believe them to be true. And I suppose that is what is called faith, even though faith can be replaced by theory in science. Same words, basically kind of getting to the same idea. Believing that something will do something or be something or is something, without having the proof as of yet at this point. And potentially can be tested through different ways and things. And is it repeatable? If that testing is repeatable, then boom. Now you've got a law. So, which makes me think of spiritual law, the phrase spiritual law and things like that. But so I think we understand that, right? So when it comes to being able to journey or have experiences where you can glimpse into the other side or the after form or the in-between, are there ways through psychedelics, through meditation, through audiovisual entrainment, through LED lights, through other things, through music, through ecstatic dancing, through, near-death experiences, right? I mean, like, these are all glimpses into something beyond, bigger, yet all along, all around, the whole time. And without having the direct experience of, like, what do we call it? The truest form of understanding death isn't real would be to die. So short of that, the rest of us are finding other ways to maybe try to glimpse that, to have a deeper understanding of the truth of this. And sometimes we go to other people, and oftentimes those people have experienced it firsthand, or have experienced such a prolonged illness or an unexplainable thing that they have tapped in even deeper than the rest of us have, because of their experience on a daily basis of being confronted with such a thing, of seeing the FedEx arrow everywhere they go. The FedEx arrow is inside of them. when the rest of us just see it on billboards or on passing trucks, on the interstate or on the highways and the byways of this great country. So, well, there's a very loud motorcycle happening. I hope that's not bothering you as you listen to this. So it is fascinating to think about the way the worldview can change according to our experiences. And obviously it makes sense. It's a pretty obvious sentence to say such a thing. Now, the emotional attachment, right, that we started this whole episode talking about, where does that come into play necessarily with being able to have better results or more results? And I think, it's also kind of an obvious thing to state that the more interesting we find something, the more engaged we are naturally in a thing, the more willing and the better we are to get to a higher level of that thing, whatever it might be. I think a very basic example would be sports. If you're naturally gifted in a sport, you might be more inclined to get good at it. But if you really love that sport, I would argue you're more inclined to try to become good at it. If there's an excitement there, an excitation. I haven't said that word in a while. That was fun. I got excited about saying excitation. This is the last break, baby, and then we're going to be right back. So thanks again for all the patrons. And, give me a follow on Instagram, share the program. Oh, and we had the Spotify Wrapped. Thank you to all the new listeners. Really appreciate you. I hope you're enjoying the program as much as I am. We'll be right back. And here we are, the excitation. Can you feel the excitation in the air? Are you excited about the excitation? Is the excitement for excitation exciting? Or has it been excited inside of you? Okay, moving on. Okay, this is Nat X. Wait, what was that guy's name? It was like, this Nat X on Paranormal, the Paranormal rock and roll, Paranormal rock and roll. Anyway, so if you love baseball, or if you love golf, or if you love chess, or if you love knitting, you are going to want to spend more time doing it. And if there's something about it that for some reason resonates inside of your bones, and I don't know, I hope you have a thing like this. I really hope you have a thing like this. For me, it's like comedy. It's the paranormal. I also love baseball cards. I love playing cornhole. I could play cornhole all day and all night. I love ping pong too. I wish I was better at ping pong. But, the more you love something, the more willing you are to dedicate a bunch of time to trying to become better at it. And the better you will become. There are plenty of stories of athletes who are so gifted athletically and in a physical way that they're just extremely, extremely good at lots of sports, right? But but with these stories come the stories where they don't care that they don't love the sport that much. They're doing it because it is something that they can be very good at and make some money out or whatever, much in the same way someone who's probably very just naturally really gifted with numbers would be an amazing kind of accountant or financial person maybe, even though they don't really care about money or numbers, even though they're just extremely, extremely gifted at working with them and understanding them. But they really love watercolors. And they'd rather, and don't say paint by numbers, and they'd rather spend their time painting, right? They'd be more inclined to at the very least try to become very, very excellent at painting with watercolors than they would numbers if numbers didn't excite them very much. And this desire to become very, very good at something is, that's a whole nother discussion. And I'm not talking about trying to become the best, which is kind of a psychotic capitalistic ideal. To become the very best at something, I have to be the very best. And that's just something that we're all taught, and something that is fed to us, and something that we learn at a very young age, that it is very beneficial to be the absolute best at something, and it is to be admired and worshipped even, when in fact it's why is it so important to become the absolute best, or to be remembered as the greatest? Like, what, that it doesn't this is kind of a new understanding for me in the last, I don't know, couple years, of just like what a sickness this idea is, to try to be remembered as the greatest or be the best at something. And if that's what's important, if that's what drives you, other than the thing itself which you're doing, the act of which that you potentially could be the best at or the greatest at, that is where the juice is, not striving to be the best. That's trying to fill a hole of some kind, or trying to find worth where previously it didn't exist, or because it had been taken from us in some way, or for some reason that was not, and the some reason would never be justified. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about finding the pleasure and the gratitude of the work itself. And I think we like when we can do something well. It feels good to do something well. There is something there. There is a feeling, an essence of skill that is satisfying in a deep way. And maybe it goes back to a primal thing. Like, the better you can be at a specific thing, the more likely you are to be able to survive, because that thing is needed for survival, maybe. I don't know. But then there's probably also a spiritual thing. The refinement of the soul and the spirit, which is the goal of every religion and every spiritualistic movement, is to purify oneself or to ascend. Ascension has in it, it's just loaded with that kind of shit, right? That bullshit about like, you got to be, to be the best, And, I say bullshit, but it doesn't mean that, it doesn't resonate with me as well. I want to be a better person. It doesn't mean I need to be the best person that's ever existed in the history of time. Although that might not be a bad goal, actually. That might be the one area of this where it actually would be acceptable, and maybe not like a psychopathy to be like, I need to be the best human being ever. But that does sound like a problem too, actually, when you say it out loud like that. Like, what's the drive? What is the reason? What is the impetus for the action? So I don't even know how I got on this. Actually, I am not the best at staying on track. You can bet your bottom dollar on that every single time. But to become deeper involved, to become closer to the thing itself. Maybe that's the goal. To be more in tune or more in touch with the things that already exist within us. That's maybe where the juice is when it comes to psychic abilities, the paranormal, etc. And once we understand that there's no true separation between us and them, me and we, me and you, this and that, maybe the better we become, understanding these things and tapping into the skill of being a person who, or, an undying entity that truly operates from a position of wholeness and love. That could be the goal, right? Like, why do we have ghost boxes? Why are we using these ghost boxes? Why are we so driven and excited by Prism on this Florida experiment, a Florida investigation with my buddy Matthew Jackson and Joshua Sean? Why are we so into this? Why does Dr. Rebecca Foster blow our minds? Why does Karen Rontowski blow our minds with her card readings? Tapping into the unseen and the unknown, which also leads us to believe that there is something bigger than ourselves outside of our physical body. It is a reinforcement of the understanding that we are connected, that there is something grander, that there is something bigger, and that is excitation you hear in my voice. Because, I don't know, it resonates with me in a deep, deep way. So these brilliant readers, these incredible devices that let us talk to something somewhere, somehow, not here, at least perceived by our immediate senses of sight and, touch. They show us something. They show us a profound truth. And that profound truth is that there is something deeper, bigger, potentially even better out there. That's what the juice is. That's where the ecstasy comes from in the ecstatic shamanic dance. That's what it's tapping into. It is the thing that it is trying to be, and it already is the thing that it's bringing to you and channeling to you from outside of our physical forms. And sometimes we need to die to experience this. And sometimes people who are just unexplainably sick experience this on a level that the rest of us don't, because it cracks them open to the reality of the universe in a way that the rest of us haven't been cracked open, because we've built these shells through material goods, preoccupations of, physical enjoyment, whether it be, Diet Cokes, donuts, sex, all that stuff. That's why we have the ghost boxes, because we're trying to reinforce this idea, or we're trying to really get to the bottom of it. And the bottom of it is something we already kind of probably know, right? And that is that physical death isn't real, and that there is truly no separation between all of us. And so, is the artist more open to it? No, everyone is open to it. But artists oftentimes are trying to tap into something through their physical art, through the physical medium of their art, whatever that is, whether it's music, whether it's painting, whether it's digital imaging, or whatever it is, whether it's podcasting, stand-up comedy, singing. Every once in a while, we feel like they've channeled something from somewhere else and brought it to us as this great gift from the beyond. And it moves us. It makes us cry. Man on the Inside, new series on Netflix. Ted Danson. Great cast. Very funny show, but very, very deep and meaningful show as well. Brings tears to your eyes watching it. There is something that it's channeling to us. We have an emotional attachment to these things. And when we are emotionally involved, the thing is going to be more likely to happen. It just makes sense. If you find a certain image boring, you're not going to stare at it in an art gallery and feel like you've talked to God. If you have an emotional attachment to some kind of image from something else in your life, like it reminds you of something from your childhood that's connected to you and your father, you might have that moment, right? Or a song, things like that. Anyway, I'm doing New Year's Eve in Dayton, Kentucky at the Commonwealth Sanctuary. I'd love to see you there and ring in the new year with you. If you're anywhere close to Dayton, Kentucky, which is right on the other side of the river from Cincinnati, RyanSingerComedy.com. All the details. Thank you so much for being here. Thanks for listening. I love you. I hope you love yourself. I hope to see you at a live show somewhere. And if I don't, well, guess what? I'll see you at the watering hole on the astral plane.